question is yours, Tom.
Yes.
And you say, when I reach mental pliancy or on the way to, I have quite a few hypnagogic mental situations, like impersonal thoughts, images, etc., which in the same time help me to get deeper into meditation state, as long as I keep my awareness very clear. Otherwise, I would get sleepy or dullness. You barely mentioned hypnagogia in your book, but those hypnagogia are always present in my meditations. And as I said, very helpful to reach that bliss state. Can also be used to go faster into jhanas. And you go on to speak of being a lucid dreamer. I'd just like to clarify, if we could, when you say, and I know this is a terminology that we often use, when you say deeper into meditation state, but what do we mean by deeper? I think this word can mean, or this phrase, deep in meditation or deeper in meditation, can mean many different things. And so if I could just ask you to clarify what you mean by deeper in meditation.
Yes, it's a very important point for me. What I mean is that when I reach access concentration and I start feeling, this rapture and all that joy coming, and there is, I'm very used to hypnagogia, so I really know those feeling, any kind of hypnagogia, and I really notice that there is a kind of hypnagogic state very close to that feeling. And as I'm used to, what I do is I just kind of making it's very difficult to explain, but I make a switch from this hypnagogic feeling to my body, and it just like give me some kind of how can I say, it helped me to feeling nothing inside the body, and then the flow can go much quicker. In fact, it just increased the capacity of feeling not anymore the body, but some kind of energy going through the body. And that helps also to go faster into the rapture and all that. And it's very difficult to explain, because it's really related to my lucid dreaming practice. And I use the hypnagogic feeling, which is very close to sleeping, but very different to just give the capacity of how can I say, let him the flow running through my body without having some like pain here or there that will stop the rapture to just increase. It's, it will be easier in French, but in English I can't do much better.
I appreciate that, but I think I'm understanding you. So usually what we mean by hypnagogia is just various images and thoughts, and they often seem to be somewhat disconnected or unrelated to each other. They just sort of drift into consciousness, and then they pass away again. When we're talking about a deep meditation state, what that means to me is that there is this much greater degree of alert awareness of many subtle aspects of our experience that otherwise get overlooked. Maybe subtle isn't the right word, as it's a bigger and fuller and more complete experience of what's happening both in the mind, body, the environment, in the meditation. So I would refer to that as deeper as opposed to what we ordinarily experience in daily life as being shallower, in the sense that it doesn't encompass nearly as much or as clearly. And then the other aspect of meditation that I would associate with deepness, although here the term doesn't, I can't compare it with another term like shallow, but it's the way that your attention works, that in a deeper state of meditation, your attention is much more, much less spontaneous in its movements, and it has a much more penetrating quality, and it's guided much more obviously by this larger awareness, which gives us the opportunity to explore what's going on in our minds and in our bodies and in our environment. Much of everything else that happens could be regarded as side effects. The joy or rapture, the mental pliancy, the various alterations in each sensory modality that take place, they're not really just incidental. They're really an important part of the process that's taking place in our mind. But the most important aspect of meditation is the power and the perceptual clarity that you have of both these two ways of knowing. One of having a much more coherent rather than patchy, more whole and coherent and clearly interconnected large view associated with awareness, and having an attention that can be used much more effectively because it can be directed by what arises in awareness and focused more stably and use the term penetrate more deeply. But what I really mean by that is it can really access more levels of mental processing of the information that is being generated from the interaction of the mind and the environment. So it can, this aspect of meditation is deep in that your attention can be like going with a microscope, changing to progressively higher power lenses where you're seeing a deeper, finer structure of what is giving rise to what you would see without the microscope or with a less high power lens. So that's the deepness as far as attention, and in terms of awareness, the deepness is shallower versus much more.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Well, maybe I mistake about the word deeper. That wasn't really the purpose. I mean, what I just wanted to say is that the use of hypnagogia is to make it easier to get inside the jhanas process, because when you arrive at the point of access concentration, and even after, sometimes you can get disturbed because your body, you know, just like blocked you, because you might have some, even your mind, I mean, there is still things that which can be a little bit hard or something. Hypnagogia, if you can use them without going into dualness and all that, it's like opening the doors, you know. It's just like everything just go wow out, and then you can really get inside this the pure feeling of the jhanas things. Or in fact, it's just like, you know, it's like, imagine there is things in a river and all that, and suddenly the flow just get everything, you get rid of it. So it's a very physical process. I mean, a physiological process that you get with the hypnagogia. But I suppose you really have to be trained to get it. So my question was did you? I mean, are you aware of this effect of what you can get with those kind of liminal state? In fact.
No, I'm not personally aware of that. There are many practices out there, and I can't say, you know, perhaps I've read about some practice that is similar to what you're talking about, and I'm just not recalling it at the moment. But in my personal experience, hypnagogia has always been somewhat the opposite of what I've been intending and trying to accomplish through meditation.
I know that. But
Yeah.
you know, but the thing is, it's true. I mean, the it's like I mean, being on the edge of, you might fall very quickly on the wrong side, but you mustn't stay in the hypnagogia. You just use this kind of soft energy, like sleeping energy that just liberate completely your body. But as soon as you get that, you get out of it. It's like it's like tricking the things. It's like hacking. But it's the idea. I mean, you can practice and remain in hypnagogia. I do it sometimes for my lucid dreaming practice, and I use meditation. But if you want to go inside the jhana and all that, then no, you stop. You just use those feeling and go back to your attention, of course.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, you're speaking of hypnagogia as a hack to get to a place that.
Yes, more like this way. Yeah. It's a tool. Actually, let's see it like a tool. Yeah, you know, you're climbing a mountain, and you have a special tool that helps you to get really more inside the rock. That's
well, if you have discovered or rediscovered a hack to help get us to the place that can give rise to insight and awakening, then that's a very wonderful thing. It's but you know, and that's we need more of those. We need to find more ways that more people can achieve that. I guess my main concern with the is just, is it a hack that's actually getting you to a place that is going to serve the ultimate purpose that for which we're practicing? Is the place that you get to by means of this hack one that from which you can very clearly examine the workings of your own mind in such a way that you can understand more of what is really happening, rather than what we naturally tend to, we naturally tend to assume that the mind is creating this accurate representation of some kind of external reality, and furthermore that in the workings of the mind, that that the mind is following the kinds of logical processes that we would associate with formal logic or mathematics or things like that. What we discover is what the mind is doing is something very, very different from that. And this gives us the keys. The whole project is to create a state of mind and to develop the faculties that can be used in that state in order to see amongst other things how the mind itself is creating the reality that you live in, and that the assumption that it is even a rough approximation of whatever is, quote, ultimately outside of the mind, it begins to become clear that this is not the case. You can see this, and that you see that you begin to see the way that everything that arises in your mind is the result of causes and conditions, and you begin to be less attached to these illusions that we have, the illusions that there are more or less discrete entities that interact with each other, but are their interaction is somewhat limited and linear. In other words, insight into the fact that there is some agency in here who is directing the process in our meditation or outside of our meditation. That there is some entity that is the recipient of information, and that somehow there's this agent and this experiencer are interacting and constituting a self rather than being a localized consciousness of the unfolding of cause and effect. So that's where we're trying to go. Does this get you closer to that? Does it give you a means to reach that?
Yeah, I mean, the what I'm talking about hypnagogia doesn't change the whole aspect of, let's say, the whole way of doing the thing. It's just a tool that you can use on the way for a special purpose, but that's it. I mean, it's nothing more than something particular. If you use it, it can be helpful to get some, I mean, kind of difficult step like pain body. Just is something very practical. In fact, I don't say it like oh, it's crazy, you know, I'm doing things. Ooh. No, it's just a tool that can be really helpful just to go. Like you have difficulty to go further because you feel tired and all that. But if you can catch this tool, it just woo, makes you some help, and then you cross this local limitation that you might have on the way. That's it. It has nothing else to do. But if you want to use it in another way, like to deeper you lucid dreaming practice and all that, you can. But it's another things. I mean, we are not talking anymore about meditation the way you talk about. It's another practice, and I don't want to interfere, you know.
Great. Well, I find this very interesting, and I'm glad we've been able to have this discussion. So, what I hear you saying is that this is a hack, and it's a hack to the place that we want to be, to a place that is conducive to insight, that is conducive to a relatively trait-like shift in perspective in an ongoing way that we might refer to as awakening. So it's taking us to that place. That's great. Then it's what's interesting for us to do. And I think the key thing for this is not to focus on the hypnagogia, but rather that hypnagogia can do this in somebody whose mind is well trained in lucid dreaming.
Yeah, that's the point. It has to be, otherwise it will be useless, because you might just fall asleep and you will lose your way. So you have to be trained on lucid dreaming, yeah, sure.
And of course, lucid dreaming is a direct analog to what we're talking about, what we refer to as awakening. You know, it's why do we call it awakening? Because we're living in a delusion. Like,
Sure.
it's like experiencing a dream and believing the contents of the dream are real. And we wake up from that and we realize the dream was just a dream, and that there is another reality that, yes. So in that case, the key thing here is, I see what you're saying. It's a hack, but the most important thing that you're doing, and I've often experienced lucid dreaming spontaneously, and it's just something that started happening years ago as a result of my meditation. I've never really done anything with it other than play with the lucid dreams while I'm having them, right? I would say, especially in light of what you're saying, that the fact that lucid dreaming arose for me rather spontaneously without ever intending or trying to develop that ability. And I've actually heard this from quite a few other meditators, that we need to, a lot can be gained by examining the phenomenon of lucid dreaming more closely and more carefully from the perspective of, this is a unique way that our mind works, and there is something important to be learned there. And in fact, definitely, from what you're saying, there is something very valuable to be learned there. And of course, the people that are big fans of lucid dreaming this is what they've been telling us for a long time, is there's something really important happening there, and that is very useful and valuable. So I think we can add that to the list of things that as we expand our understanding of how the mind works and how we can lead the mind to a more awakened state of recognizing both its own nature and the nature of its interaction with whatever lies beyond it, that's valuable. It's a tool that's been out there, and we need to investigate it more.
Exactly. I mean, the lucid dreaming is you become lucid in a dream state, or as I do, you get inside the dream already awake. I mean, already, because I practice the way that you don't lose your consciousness, you go straight on the dream. Right. But in fact, in reality, in this in IRL, which is in the real world, as we call it, it's the same. We are kind of dreamers, and we try to become lucid. We try to get more lucidity. So there is really a kind of parallel, we say, just in both things. So yeah, that's definitely. But sure, hypnagogia is tricky. So it's like a sword. There is two sides. There is one can really help you, but the other one can put you inside in dualness. So it's you have to be used to these kind of tools. Otherwise, you might just lose yourself. Definitely.
Of course, and that's what I've always said. Hypnagogia is a sign of dullness, but I now will say we'll add a caveat to that. It might be also an opportunity to, but I'd put the emphasis on the lucid dreaming. If you have skill in lucid dreaming, then hypnagogia may become a powerful tool for
Yeah.
entering a deeper meditation state. I don't know. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that? Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
can I add just one question, or maybe at the end of the, or is it good if I ask you another question right now? Nothing to do with hypnagogia.
I think so. Yes, that would be fine.
Okay, so it's also very practical. When I get inside those jhana state, I'm calling the pleasure one, not the luminous one, because I can't really get inside. I can really see the difference between 1, 2, and 3, which I used to call love, and then joy, and then tranquility, peace. But when I reach the fourth one, it's getting really really strange, because in fact what I feel is the energy in my body, the flow is getting so strong that I can't feel anymore anything of my body. I can't sweep like a body scan and all that, because there is nothing
Right.
and I already had this feeling of like how do you call it, like the fifth one, with no limits and limitless consciousness and all that. But I mean, what I really feel is a very strong increase of the flow. And at one point, I remember in stage 9, you say that what's important is like a river. The river, the flow is so strong that you have to control it and try to make it. And it's really what I feel, like it's like it's getting sometimes so strong that, wow, what can I do anymore? It's just like poof. And so that's what I wanted to tell you. It's difficult to, I feel it difficult to make the difference between the higher jhana, because the flow is very strong and take the whole place, in fact.
Okay, and then so one of the things I think that we need to do is clarify what you mean by the word flow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you talking about your mind is in a highly energized state?
It's mine, of course, but it's a very physical feeling that when you are, it's something you learn when you get those SN Goenka Vipassana retreat, that they call the free flow, that there is one point where you cannot really body scan part by part, because you can just let the flow going from your head to feet and feet to head. This is the kind of things, but it goes much stronger than that, actually, because there is one point where, of course, you don't feel your body, you don't feel nerves, sinew, and all that. You just feel a flow, as something really like energy all over your body. But there is one point where you don't feel anymore your body. It's just like a flow everywhere. You can't just sweep from head to feet, because there is no more really head to feet. Yeah. That's what I mean.
Yes, right. And okay, and so I agree with you. That is where a very powerful fourth jhana is going to. Those things are not going to be experienced in the way that we're used to, and so that does initially, at least, leave us somewhat ungrounded. And the formless jhanas are actually one of a variety of different elaborations or ways to use what was referred to as the fourth jhana. And one of them that you might find, with your background, extremely valuable is a kind of the contents of your unconscious mind become much more accessible, or and much more freely become conscious, and we can begin to have a very different kind of experience of an exploration of the relationship of unconscious mental processing to conscious experience. So this can take a variety of different forms. And what the formless jhanas do is, in essence, the jhana of infinite space is basically allowing the part of our mind that imposes a perspective of space to fall away, and we lose that sense of locality. And what follows out of that is that consciousness is no longer experienced as being localized, because the meaning of localization changes, and the world in which this is occurring is the world of the mind alone. The other way of using this is to explore essentially the way the unconscious mind, the concept of archetypes. You're familiar with that English word? I'm sure it has a French.
Sure. It's the same.
It's the same. Yes, you can explore the archetypes, both the universal archetypes and the individual archetypes that play a major role in the way your mind constructs its reality. And so this is what has been described by another meditation teacher as the exploration of the realms of magic and mystery, right? Which is really an appropriate description of it. You're delving into the unconscious mind. With your experience with lucid dreaming, with being able to remain in the state of lucidity as fragmentary thoughts and images and so forth arise from the unconscious as a hack to get into this, I think if you apply exactly that same skill to the experience that you're having in fourth jhana, that I think you'll find it a very productive experience for you. And also you'll find it provides because it's a more of a familiar place for you to be in, it will provide you with a grounding, so you don't have so much of this feeling of being overwhelmed by the flow of the experience itself. Does that make sense to you?
Yes. That's it's nice of what you said, because I in this kind of fourth jhana state, I often have some kind of hypnagogia, but very controlled one. They don't at this state, when the flow is so strong, hypnagogia cannot get me inside the sleep anymore. I just look at them and it's just like magic, because they can't really, they have not this power anymore of losing my consciousness. It's just I can't just watch them. But they are somebody write a book and he called them auto-symbolic. They start to play things that have some relation about some kind of personal archetype, and you can really feel it. And it's it's some kind of lesson, but not easy one, but you can learn things through that. So sometimes I let those images and things, it's very difficult to explain, that just play just to see what they want to say in a way. But I don't think anymore. I just like see those things coming and in and out, and that's it.
Right.
So sure, I use the state.
Yeah, well, that's a really good way to use it. And then when you come out of that jhana, just allow your mind to hold the experience of that jhana in sort of simultaneously with the experience of having arisen from jhana, and perhaps the familiar recollection of what the pre-jhanic state is like. This can be a trigger for insight. It's a very powerful way of using insight. I don't know whether you're interested in referring to the suttas in this, but in the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length saying, there is a sutta called One by One, and the number of it is actually 111. Makes it really easy to remember. So if you go to the Majjhima Nikaya Sutta One by One, there's a description there. It's sort of a general description, doesn't go into this much detail, but of how Sariputta, the Buddha is describing how Sariputta used the jhanas to bring about insight and awakening, become an arhat. So
Okay.
you might find some.
Yeah, I'll have a look. Yeah, definitely.
I personally have found this to be a very powerful insight-inducing practice.
Yeah.
Doing exactly what you say, just allowing this information to arise, and it later begins to contribute to the formation of a new and different kind of perception of reality.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Let's look at, let's see, I think we have. I have a question from William, who is, are you here today, William? No, you're not. Oh, yeah, you are. Hi, Bill.
Hi.
Hi. Yes, look at you. Let's have a look at your question, and then we'll just hear what other people have to talk about. So, been doing Shinzen's see, hear, feel, in, and out, which I guess is momentary attention. Is this like Dzogchen or Mahamudra meditations on the activities of the mind? And does working with momentary attention develop greater attention skills or greater peripheral awareness skills, or both equally? So, and then you go on to something else. Okay, well, let me answer the second part of this first. Does working with momentary attention develop greater attention skills? That depends on, yes, go ahead. Oh, I thought someone was going to say something. It depends on what you mean by momentary attention, okay? There are some people who use the term momentary attention, or it's a momentary attention is a translation of kanika samadhi, and the fact that it's referred to as a samadhi is very significant there in terms of how you interpret the English momentary concentration or momentary attention. Because what we ordinarily experience, except when we become engrossed with something, is that for a very large part of the time, attention is moving from one thing to another to another. And even when it becomes engrossed in one thing, it will tend to be alternating with others, and we'll have the experience of simultaneously attending to more things, more than one thing at a time. And to refer to this as momentary attention, as though it were what we're being referred to by Kanika Samadhi, is a bit of, well, it seems to me rather silly to say that the ordinary behavior of our attention is a kind of samadhi, because just the ability to hold your attention relatively stably on one thing is referred to as the parikama, or the preliminary samadhi, the first samadhi, the beginner's samadhi. The other way of using the term momentary attention is where the mind is so well trained, like in stage 8 in the descriptions there, where attention is guided by awareness wherever it lands and for however long it stays on that particular object. It is as if it was in a state of full absorption with that object, and it has the full capacity of vipassana, or seeing into, in that. So that is a very, very powerful form of momentary attention that I think deserves to be described as samadhi. Now, in Shinzen's practice and in the in other noting practices like the Mahasi and things like that, what you are doing is you are developing an intentional control over attention, and you are, when I say you and intentional and things like that, let's stand back and objectify this. The mind system is starting to shift into a place where the movements of attention are being directed by awareness, and the function of awareness in directing attention has to do with discerning what has the highest degree of salience in at the time that these events are occurring. So when you are doing Shinzen's practice, whether you're seeing in, seeing out, whatever the different forms of this intentional directing of attention, you are doing essentially what Kanaka Samadhi is about. The longer you do it, the better you will get at this. And if you are able to do any kind of noting practice where you get to see, if something arises in awareness and attention is drawn to it, if you label it, then this tends to interrupt the process by which what in a more daily or typical non-meditation situation, attention would become engrossed with the object to some degree, determine whether or not it held any further interest, and then either remain involved with it or move away from it. When you label that, you shift to a different mode of perceiving the object of attention. You're putting a label on it, and that allows you then to redirect your attention back to, for example, the rise and fall of the abdomen, or more in the case of Shinzen's practice, to other modalities. See an image arises, you see in. There may be a verbal content that arises in response to that, and you hear in. There may be some environmental factor that impacts your sense organs, and you may see, hear, or feel out as a result of that. So all of these noting practices are making use of the purposes that Kanaka Samadhi, as a well-developed skill, as actually the highest level of samadhi, that of unifying the mind, bringing stabilizing attention, empowering attention through its interaction with awareness. So what you're doing, these are practices that are helping you to approach that and use that use that faculty in that same way. The more you do this, the more that you will actually develop a real Kanaka samadhi. Okay, so what that implies, if you look at what I'm guiding you through in the first 6 of the 10 stages, I'm guiding you in the development of both this faculty of awareness and the faculty of attention, so that you can achieve these different levels of samadhi, including ultimately the momentary samadhi, which all of the practices in the first half of stage 8 are practices where you're basically using Kanaka, or momentary attention. Kanaka samadhi, momentary attention. And this is a very powerful tool. Does working with momentary attention develop greater attention skills? As a matter of fact, it does, or greater peripheral awareness. It's not an or, it's both. And it is both, well, different practices, the word equally here, to say whether or not they develop them equally. If you do the practices in TMI, what you're doing is you're really much more emphasizing the development of the awareness faculty in order to bring about the samadhi. You're using sati to develop very powerful samadhi. These noting practices are putting more of the emphasis on the intentional, the intentional use of attention. That has the inevitable effect of increasing the power of your awareness, because the only way that the mind can accomplish this task is to have this faculty of awareness that is monitoring the events that are taking place as they unfold and providing direction. When one first begins to do Shinzen's noting practice, if one hasn't already done some practices to stabilize attention, noting leads to mind wandering, leads to forgetting, or leads to forgetting into mind wandering and so forth. Just as with any other practice, the more you do it though, and in this sense, the labeling helps, because it's this mode switch which helps to keep attention from behaving the way it normally would. It helps to keep it on track. But in order to do that, you have to, quote, remember to, when your attention moves, to label what it's moved to. You also have to remember, once you've labeled it, and once it loses its attractive power, having been labeled and identified, the act of labeling it makes it gives you the feeling that, oh, that's known now. I don't need to attend to it longer, so that the attention can move on. So different practices don't develop these equally, but they develop them both. If they didn't develop them both, they just simply wouldn't work. And in that sense, they're actually complementary. And one of the gratifying things that I'm seeing happening is that students of Shinzen's and students of TMI are comparing these practices and trying to emphasize the complementarity of the two, so that people can use the two practices together. And I really appreciate that, because I think that's the kind of advance in meditation technology which is going to carry us further than There's these people over here that do various kinds of noting practices, and there's people over here that do these other kinds of practices, and these people over here that do yet another. It's where do these converge? Where do they complement each other? What are the aspects of one practice that can further enhance another practice? And what does a comparison of them reveal about the weaknesses of certain practices and how they can be overcome? So going back to your question here, looking at it, does working with momentary attention develop greater attention skills? Yes, or greater peripheral awareness skills, or both, but it develops both. The see, hear, feel in and out. Is this like Dzogchen or Mahamudra meditations on the activities of the mind? In a broad sense, they are similar, because what you are doing is you're investigating the nature of the mind as the mind does its thing, right? The mind is investigating itself. And the Mahamudra practice I have described in TMI as meditation on the mind. So, of course, these are all different ways of meditating on the mind. But there's some very distinctive differences that are methodologically and consequentially extremely important between Mahamudra practice on the one hand and the see, hear, feel in and out of Shinzen's practice. So once again, we come to an area where there is a convergence, but we're coming at the same thing from two very, very different directions. And the experience of those is not going to be the same. So it raises the question of is there potential for, in one way or another, combining the use of these practices to make either or both more effective, right? And which, as I said, I believe there is. In the Mahamudra practice, we're doing something very interesting that you really can't do without having developed a pretty high level of samatha. And that's one of the things that I find most disappointing about what's happened with Dzogchen and Mahamudra in the modern world after the diaspora has come into the West. And Westerners don't want to develop samatha. They say, I want to do Mahamudra. Whereas if you go to a classic text, or even a modern text on Mahamudra, you're going to find the first half of that text is all about developing shamatha. And it's after you've developed shamatha that you do Mahamudra, because the really important thing about Mahamudra is that there is an interesting transformation in the relationship between attention and awareness. And even the practice of Mahamudra, in order to enter the Mahamudra state, you use your awareness whenever it notices that attention is beginning to coalesce around a particular object. It lets go of that. And the result is a different state, which I'm not really sure how best to describe, but what feels subjectively as though there's a merging of attention and awareness, so that the properties of both are being exercised simultaneously. That there is the more reductive and analytical capacity of attention that is being brought to a holistic view of the activity of the mind. So you're watching the whole mind do its thing, and this the faculties usually associated, or the properties usually associated with attention, are kind of analyzing what's happening. And this gives rise to the particular insights. You would be guided in Mahamudra to answer some ridiculous questions in the first place, like what color is the mind, what's the shape of the mind, how big is the mind, where is the mind, and things like this. These are observed questions, but they're the way that attention frames the world. Okay, so in this state of Mahamudra, you would be exercising, you're training yourself to exercise some of the capacities normally associated with focusing on an isolated object and approaching it analytically and reductively to this global observation of the mind functioning as a whole. And the result of this is the recognition that all dhammas, everything that arises in consciousness, is of the nature of mind itself, rather than, as we've always assumed, being some kind of a relatively accurate representation of some more ultimate reality. So we see that. And then further on in the process, we have the experience of seeing, of understanding that the mind itself is of the same empty nature, that even mind is a mental construct, which is a circular statement, obviously. But its very circularity is what gives rise to the insight into it, right? So you get to different places with these things, but they are converging. They're converging on the same thing. They're converging on the realization of the various things that we've categorized as insights. Is that helpful in terms of what you're actually trying to ask me?
Well, I was just wondering if they were sort of similar kinds of techniques in terms of just my impression, or I guess when I spend the time doing the Shinzen approach,
Mm-hmm.
I probably spend most of my time just in feel out with the breath and in body sensations, and hear out.
Yes.
Very little else going on.
Yeah. Well, these are very different techniques. And because in Dzogchen, those things, those feel out, hear out, see out, those things are included in what you're doing is you're observing these external sensory phenomena as being something that is arising within the mind, rather than it's like you're turning your attention from inside to outside and you're looking at something that's outside. You realize there is no outside, there is only the mind, and that the here out is actually a kind of here in. The only difference is the degree to which we normally attribute the here out to being something outside of the mind. And it does originate with something outside of the mind. That's what makes it, the idea that there is nothing but mind itself and mind creates all of reality is, it ignores the fact that there is something going on outside of the mind that is driving the activities of the mind. The mind is in constant interaction with something that it doesn't know and that is trying to know it. Dzogchen and Mahamudra are going to give you a much deeper recognition of this, because in the Mahamudra state, you're going to see that there is nothing that you would label out that is actually not in.
All right. I mean, I guess it was just a speculation.
Yeah, and it's a good speculation in that to the degree that you can appreciate both the similarities and the differences of these, you can understand better what each of these practices is doing, and you can understand it's a kind of contemplation of experience that can lead you to a deeper understanding of what is really going on in your life experience as it unfolds. You also mentioned, how would you compare your epistemological, ontological description of it all with the generalizations of Donald Hoffman about the limitations of our ability to have an accurate description at all? I think that Donald Hoffman's his basic idea, which is now, I think, just, I don't know if there's anybody that doesn't realize that his basic analogy of the models that we create in our mind are more like the computer interface, and what they are representing. They bear so little relevance or so little similarity to what it is that they purport to represent. So, I mean, that not a new idea, but Donald Hoffman presented it to the world in a way that everybody, a global aha experience arose out of it. And yes, ontologically, there exists something beyond the experience of the individual mind, whatever that is. Epistemologically, all that we can know is what our mind fabricates in an attempt to explain the events that we experience, and that is driven by survival. So the mind that is carrying out this process came into being to support the survival of an individual, and therefore it will take whatever information it receives just as information, and it will organize it in the way that is most conducive to survival. To the degree that it doesn't organize that information in a way that is very effective, it will become at risk of not surviving. So it will revise its model until it gets to something that works better. Minds that are genetically predisposed to do a better job of this, of course, survive longer and produce more offspring. So there's an interaction between genetics and the capacity to generate functionally effective models in the world. In other words, to create more useful computer interfaces. And of course, that's what Microsoft and Apple were competing with right from the beginning, is which one of us can produce the most effective and valuable computer interface. Neither one has anything to do with what's actually going on inside your computer, but which one is going to allow you to perform the tasks you need to perform most easily and most readily. And that's what Donald saw. Now, there is what he has found, and this isn't surprising, is that in computer simulations, that the more accurately a simulated intelligence models reality, the less effective it is in the less it doesn't have as great a capacity to survive, right? Now, I think this is not at all surprising, because any kind of intelligence, a computer program that's a kind of artificial intelligence, or the intelligence of a mammalian brain, including a human brain, has its limitations. And the most workable model is the one that allows it to, that takes the maximum advantage of the capabilities that it has and avoids those aspects of reality which are going to obscure those. So the degree of simplification is going to be a reflection of the functional capacities of the mind. Human beings, I think, model reality far more accurately than amphibians, for example. Does that mean that the model that human beings create of reality is even 1% accurate? No, it just means it's 10,000 times better than the model that an amphibian produces. And it has to be, because humans are capable of more, of doing more. And it's really the interaction between an organism and an environment that this is all about. So frogs do best with a very, very simple picture of the environment. Cosmology, physics, mathematics, and things like that are way beyond the capacity of an amphibian's mind, right? Not only are they, to any degree that those things beyond what's absolutely necessary for a frog to have a better than 50% chance of surviving and reproducing is probably going to get in the way and be problematic. Look at humans, though. Our capacity to interact with and affect the environment it's just many magnitudes, many orders of magnitude greater, to the extent that we're potentially destroying the planet. You know, we are damaging the entire ecosystem and everything else. What that tells us is that our models, the models of reality that we're working on, are inadequate. They fall short in very serious ways of representing things as they really are. And of course, the most obvious one that began to stand out in the 60s is that all life, the entire biosphere, was an interconnected whole. You fiddle with one part and it affects everything else. And somehow or another, understanding this intellectually has to this very day not led to a change in behavior, which means it hasn't resulted in, or to the degree that it has, it's been in a very limited way, and perceiving reality from that interconnected perspective. So intellectually, we can separate our recycling from our garbage. Intellectually, we can train ourselves to try to do less of those things that affect the interconnectedness of everything. But we are not coming from a perceptual place of interconnectedness of everything. Our mind can't go that far. It's a limitation of our minds, which I believe is potentially overcome by awakening. But and if we became an awakened society, if children learned, following birth, if their model of reality that was developed culturally and then was reinforced through their personal experience was one of the interconnectedness of everything, the tendency to do the kinds of things that are so damaging wouldn't even exist. And the way that we would approach the problems that do exist would be coming from a completely different perspective. That's why I believe awakening is the only hope of human beings surviving. And basically, you could just say that we have the ability to create a model of reality in our minds that is more accurate in that it takes into account this interconnectedness. And if we can do this collectively, then our chances of survival are much, much greater.
Well, at least the one good thing about this is that, like in British Columbia, now it's mandated to have social emotional learning combined with mindfulness to be mandatory from kindergarten to 12th grade. So at least there are some places in which education is advancing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there are movements in the right direction taking place. We're in a desperate race against time in this case. But yeah, we're moving in the right direction.
A good time to have no expectations.
Yes. Yeah, a good time to apply the principle of if there's something you can do to make things better, do it. If there isn't, then don't meddle and just accept things the way they are and try to be wise enough to know the difference. Because collectively what we've done is we keep trying to fix things, and the way that we try to fix things ends up making them worse. It's because we keep reverting to a model that doesn't take into account the reality to a sufficient degree.
Right. So it's like looking at, we have a tendency to look at problems and solutions, and then we don't ever see, well, what is the effect of the solution? What are the side effects? What's the blowback?
Right.
How is the solution going to be recycled through reality?
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, our viewpoint is so narrow. Anyway, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I see that there's something in the chat. If you don't have your chat open, you can open and see it. It's from do you call yourself Dermot or Douglas?
Dermot is fine. That's what I. Does it say Douglas?
I thought that I heard you refer to yourself as Douglas yesterday, and I thought I'd check on that because it says Dermot. Anyway, you say.
My name Polish.
You say, I thought it would be helpful and certainly interesting to have a glossary index of TMI practices of where the different techniques came from, which traditions, which are common to different traditions. If this is something you'd be willing to do for a new edition of TMI or as a standalone, this is certainly something that I would be willing to do. But there's so many things that I'm not only willing to do, would love to do, yet there's limitations of time and energy. From the looks of you, you can appreciate the effects that age have on this. Someone like Mark has all the energy and vitality of youth and an unknown but hopefully very large number of years ahead of him in order to accomplish that. You and I are more limited, and we have to take into account those limitations. So whether or not that's something that I would get around to doing, I agree. It would be useful, especially in the project that I've described several times here of looking at different practice traditions from the point of view of their differences and their commonalities and their potential complementarities, and how seeing several at once can give us some sort of deeper insight into how they're all working and how we might achieve the end result much more quickly and effectively.
Yep.
So it's a valuable thing.
I was enjoying listening to making the connection between the noting practices and, which is also a labeling that comes in stage 4, 3 and 4, and which are obviously connected. But there are many others that every night, oh, I see, that's also a commonality.
That's right.
And it's helpful explaining to other people, when I'm talking about TMI to people who haven't read the book yet, they say, well, it draws on this and that
yes.
traditions. It's not like
yes,
not an exclusive thing. It's one of its strengths.
Yes, it's a framework based on the way the human mind works and where we're trying to move the mind to, and therefore it draws on techniques from methods and even ideas from many different sources. And that's the nice thing of having a framework or an armature to build on, is you're not limited by the superficialities that you would be otherwise. So,
yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Sorry.
Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question or raise a discussion?
This time for sure.
I was curious, you're still working on another book now?
Yes, well, I have 2 books in progress. Unfortunate life events have interrupted my work on both of these. Right now I'm in kind of a financial struggle for survival, also trying to sort out a lot of things in my personal life and my relationship to Dharma students and things like that. For some reason or other, part of the unfolding of suchness was an extremely destructive event, which has robbed me of about 6 months worth of what could have been productive time working on both of these books. Instead, it has led me to do other things that have produced other value in themselves. So this past 6 months has been valuable, and I would say that a fair bit of what I've learned over the last 6 months will make its way into one or both of these books once I get back to being able to work on them. But I find myself in a very challenged position, which limits far more than I would have expected, limits my ability to do these things. Right now, my number one thing is trying to ensure my future survival in just being able to continue living. Well, you don't need to get into the details of that. Health-wise, though, I mean, one of the biggest threats to my ability to write and produce more things has been my health, and I'm actually healthier now than I have been in years. And so, if I can overcome these other problems, then hopefully I can get back to doing what I most would like to do, and what many of you would most like me to do. So
Well, hopefully there can be some kind of a reconciliation and just, you know, ending all these disputes or whatever.
Yes, that is truly what I would hope for. That yes, this absolutely should never have happened. It's a most definitely a tragic comedy or comedy of errors or something like that. It's just you know, but it is what it is. It's interesting. It is what it is. What can I say? I'm trying to find my way through this. So, and I really appreciate your support in this, just by being contributors to Patreon. With all of the other means of support that I had gone, this still allows me to have someone do research for me on the books. This is the one thing on the books that I'm continuing with. I have a research assistant who's extremely good at, I say something like, go find such and such a term, see wherever it's used in the suttas, and see where the usage of that appears in the various strata of the suttas, so that I understand a little more clearly what the Buddha was trying to say when he used this term. So I have the money to do that. Hopefully when I get to the point where I'm ready for editing, Patreon funds will pay for editing. Then there will be, unless a publisher decides to take it on, then I'll need money for layout and printing, etc. So by being patrons on my Patreon account, you're providing the funds that should eventually allow these books to become a reality. And I appreciate the emotional support as well as the financial support of your monthly contributions. And most especially, I just enjoy interacting with you in these Q&A sessions. They are some of the high points of my life at this time. So thanks. Thank you for being here. Yes, I really appreciate it. And maybe that's a good point to say goodbye on until the next one. Still trying to find the ideal time to be able to accommodate the maximum number of people. So I'm not sure when the next, in terms of days of the week and time of the day, I'm not sure when the next one's going to be, but we'll try to figure that out and get that information to you more quickly than we have in the past. So, all right. Until then, be well.
Thank you all.